Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Winning in Five. My name is Jeb Dunkelberger, and I am the CEO of ClearPoint Health. Today, I have a featured guest. His name is Jordan Feldman. He is the CEO and co-founder of Rightway. Rightway is a technology and services company radically simplifying the healthcare experience for clients and members. Rightway's transparent pharmacy benefit management model saves employers 15% on pharmacy costs by driving every prescription to true lower net cost. The PBM offers employers audit level insights into every transaction as it connects members to quality care. Members receive high touch pharmacy support from a pharmacy navigation team. Now, as you know, with Winning in Five, we're going to dig deep and we're going to dig fast. So, without any other further ado, I welcome Jordan Feldman to the show. Jordan, thank you so much for joining me today.
Jeb, it's great to be here, and we're really looking forward to the conversation.
Great. So I did give a brief intro, but I always think it's helpful as a co-founder and CEO for you to laminate a few of the things around what makes Rightway so special and so different. But do you mind, before we get too deep, just giving a general overview of the company, of what you built?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Rightway was founded in the care navigation and advocacy space. And I think that informs so much of our differentiation for how we take on the pharmacy benefit marketplace. We were built to provide every member a doctor in the family, that support, that advocacy, that guidance, that handholding to be a better, more empowered healthcare consumer. What we found was we couldn't do that within the pharmacy benefit space. It was broken. It was fundamentally misaligned. It was lacking a member experience. And we really wanted to reinvent and re-architect what it meant to be a PBM by putting the member in the center of the experience. Not the rebate, not the spread price, not the financial misalignment, but wrapping our arms around the member with that same support as if you had a doctor in the family, a pharmacist in the family. And when that starts to happen, we see all the downstream benefit and efficiency of better utilization, better adherence, and ultimately more sustainable cost for the pharmacy benefit.
Wonderful. Well, with that, then, we have to go to this question first and foremost because we ask all of our guests this, which is what's one thing you know to be true about the PBM sector that most everyone else would disagree with you on?
So PBMs have been in the news a heck of a lot lately. From multiple dimensions. There's been the legislation portion of it where, at the state level, there's been an attack on PBMs owning retail pharmacies or mail order pharmacies or specialty pharmacies within certain jurisdictions. At the national level, there's been a delinkage of the cost of the pill from the PBM's ability to make money. There's also been litigation. There's been employees who are actually suing their employer for not acting as a fiduciary as it relates to their pharmacy benefit management. So, these two combined would start to establish what is, becoming an increasingly more common point of view, but I'll take it to the extreme, which is PBMs have been operating in a borderline criminal fashion and essentially stealing money from employers and their employees and family members in a systematic and orchestrated way. They make more money when higher cost drugs are dispensed. They make more money when more drugs are dispensed. And their financial model at every step of the pharmacy value chain is meant to extract value for the PBM, not help reduce and make sustainable the pharmacy benefit. So, when we think about the PBM space historically, it's essentially been an oligopoly. It's been, 3 to 4 players that have accrued the largest profit pool, maybe in healthcare. And at every step of the equation, instead of figuring out how they're going to work with the member, make the experience better, they're looking for ways to continue to monetize the value. So, an example of that is how they own their specialty pharmacies. Specialty pharmacy has become the largest part of pharmacy benefit spend. And within that, they're essentially making up prices within their specialty pharmacy, and there's no marketplace competition. There's no transparency. There's no auditability. We have bad actors. It goes beyond just how they're operating and the way they're doing integration of their medical side. So, they're not sharing data feeds that are necessary to carve out. They're charging exorbitant carve out fees. So, we really have this bad actor that's monopolizing the pharmacy benefit ecosystem. And when pharmacy benefit spend was 5% of total healthcare spend, I don't think people cared a heck of a lot. It was kind of a throw in, it was carved into medical, and if it was an afterthought. Now that pharmacy benefit is 30 to 35% of total healthcare spend and growing exponentially, people are pulling back the curtain and starting to ask questions around, again, a borderline criminal enterprise that is artificially inflating the cost of prescription drugs for plan sponsors and their members. So I'll pause there and we can unpack it.
Yeah. No, that's great. And thank you so much for just the extreme amount of detail. Now, you're going pretty far, right? The criminal enterprises, and I appreciate just your forthrightness. You talked a lot about where the standard model goes wrong. How do you guys do it differently? And how do you do it better? Also, look, as somebody that's also in the industry, how do you avoid not going after those perverse incentives that eventually we all fear that an investor or another C-suite executive is going to see and say, we need to, exploit that for the betterment of patient outcomes or whatever the, monologue is that goes along with extorting high amounts of money.
Well, look, the profitability and the profit pools within the pharmacy benefit space are extraordinary. How are we doing this different? And what is our commitment to really innovating and transforming the space? I would look at it across two vectors. The first one is financial alignment. The second one is member obsession. On the financial alignment side, we're doing a few things that I think are super interesting. The first one is we're going to be 100% pass through of rebates. There's no spread pricing. All of the games and gimmicks that PBMs have been able to monetize historically, we are completely getting rid of. We're a per member per month admin fee model. We make money one way as a PBM and as an organization. That admin fee for taking care of your members, not when more drugs are dispensed, not when higher cost drugs are dispensed. So that neutrality, that fiduciary like alignment is number one. Number two is we're not going to own any dispensing assets. I think that's the biggest racket in the PBM space today, which is that PBMs own their specialty pharmacies, own their mail order pharmacies, in some cases own their retail pharmacies, and they've essentially created ecosystem capture. They've created the ability to essentially make up prices within each of those channels at the detriment of plan sponsors and their members. So when we look at this, it's a different equation for Rightway, where we create a marketplace of competition. When Mark Cuban Cost Plus Drugs comes out and is able to get us lower cost drugs through their channel, we're going to incorporate that and vend that in. When Amazon PillPack is able to get cheaper drugs through their mail order, or Walgreens through their specialty pharmacy, we want to embrace that innovation. We want to embrace that marketplace competition and bring that to the ecosystem. So, we don't own dispensing channels. We don't fill our factories like the traditional PBM does, and we create that marketplace of competition. The third one on the financial alignment side is we've also introduced what's called a per member per month guarantee. Pharmacy benefits historically has only been about the spreadsheet and the discount and the rebate and the dispensing fee and all the stuff that consultants have historically modeled to understand what's going to be the gross and net cost of one PBM versus another PBM. What we've said is it can't just be about the unit cost. Pharmacy benefit spend is price of the pill times utilization. All we have focused on historically is price of the pill. But what we need to do is look at price of the pill and look at smart utilization, efficient utilization. So what we're going to do is we're going to take historical data, we're going to underwrite that from an actuarial perspective, and we're going to put some skin in the game and some accountability around what we think we're going to be able to do to manage not only the gross cost in the rebate, but the net cost of the pharmacy benefit. And I think that's where so many folks have gone wrong within the pharmacy benefit space historically. We've focused on gross cost and rebate. We haven't focused on net cost, which is at the end of the day, all that should really matter. So on the financial alignment side, we've kind of transformed the model, but I would say that that is necessary, but not sufficient. If we were just a financially aligned PBM, I could argue there's been that in the space historically, that there's been an alternative to the big three as it relates to the financial alignment. Rightway's singular reason for existing is to be member obsessed, is to take the pharmacy benefit and add a member experience to it in a way that's really never been done before. Take that pharmacist in the family, put that community pharmacist that used to be such an essential part of the healthcare ecosystem, and give that back to the member. What does a pharmacy experience look like today? You go to the pharmacy, you wait online, you hold your breath, you hope the prior authorization has been through, you see if a good RX card's available, and you have no transparency or understanding or advocacy as it relates to, not only the underlying drug that the doctor just prescribed, but the access and the affordability of that drug. So, our member obsession of pairing every member with a clinical pharmacist, of giving them a technology ecosystem that provides transparency, that provides clinical insights, that provides proactive outreach, is really our approach to transforming what it means to be a PBM member. The existing PBM experience is a BIN number and an ID card and wishing you good luck. And that goes back to the financial realities of the ecosystem, which is the traditional PBMs really have no alignment or incentive to engage the underlying member. So we've taken a step back. We've said, from a financial alignment perspective, we're going to be that fiduciary. We're going to be neutral. We're going to introduce marketplace competition. We're going to introduce accountability through a per member per month guarantee. And then on the other side of the ledger, we have built the first member obsessed PBM. And I would argue that that's our reason for existing. That's what's generating high net promoter scores, high levels of engagement, and ultimately members and plan sponsors who are seeing that there is a better way forward within a pharmacy benefit model and partnership.
Got it. Got it. That makes a lot of sense. Now, I just want to hang on to this point real quick, though. So, on the PMPM guarantee, I think a lot of people are used to when an organization takes risk, there are some rules, right? And same thing that goes for ClearPoint Health. If we're going to take risk, we're also going to expect that our partner is going to uphold a certain standard. How does that kind of develop, and how do your partners see this? So when you take on that PMPM, are there big kind of gargantuan asks, or is it fairly easy for them to adopt the principles and standards that you require?
Very simple to adopt those standards and principles. We want to be transparent and, simplified as it relates to contracting, as it relates to exclusions. The crazy part of the pharmacy benefit space is it's been plagued by 70-page contracts and legalese and ways to hide money through offshore accounts in the Caymans or Switzerland, or be able to retain a larger percentage of the rebate than has historically been agreed to. Our contracts are straightforward. They're simple. Remember, we only make money one way. And when we define our per member per month guarantee, that is meant to really provide the transparency and the sort of alignment that we seek to create. So whether it's our partners or the underlying plan sponsor, it's all about that simplicity and that transparency in the model.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Well, that makes a lot of sense. Naturally, with that, if you're putting your money where your mouth is and you're believing in all the right things, there's no question that the right way member experience has to be a game changer. I mean, just based upon the obsession that you're talking about, it would be helpful for you to tell me, what features are top of mind when you designed it, or what were the things too that were non-negotiables, things that you said, whatever we do, we can't do it that way.
Yeah, so we look at the member experience and kind of a harmonized environment that takes a clinical pharmacist, going back to that community pharmacist that used to sit behind the local pharmacy that's now been bought by a big chain. But we want to introduce that clinical pharmacist back, and we want to create a world-class ecosystem that has all the best technology that healthcare can offer. So when we think about the member experience, it's that clinical pharmacist that's going to be the quarterback, that's going to be the first point of contact for that member. They can chat with them, they can call them, they can have any sort of interaction that they need to with that underlying member. And, that's going to be the one that's going to take you from point of diagnosis and prescription all the way towards making sure that that drug is most affordable and accessible for that member. That's where it starts. But then we give them a really powerful technology platform that's mobile based, that's desktop based, that's going to have all of these features and functionality, that's going to tell them, here's what prescription drugs you're on. Here's what they're costing today. Here are, through the channels, of what they may be able to cost if you were to look at a different pharmacy, or you were able to look at mail order, or you were able to look at maybe a cash paid discount card. It's also going to make recommendations, whether it's a generic, whether it's a preferred brand, or in the most extreme case, if a biosimilar is available. And not only is it going to tell you, hey, here are your options, but the biggest challenge in healthcare is actually the conversion, the execution of these different options. So, what we're going to do with our clinical pharmacists, with our technology, is if a member's on Humira and a cost effective biosimilar like Usimary is available, we're actually going to do that heavy lifting for the member. We're going to call the doctor. We're going to make sure that we're coordinating with the dispensing specialty pharmacy, whether it's Mark Cuban or Walgreens or whoever it may be. And then we're going to have the conversation with the member, highlighting, hey, here are the clinical considerations for a brand to biosimilar change. Here are the financial considerations for a brand to biosimilar change. Here are the logistical considerations for this change. And then we're going to do all of that for them. Once it's check, check, check on those three, the $5,000 drug versus the $50,000 drug is going to show up on their doorstep, the same way that it has historically been done. And taking that hard work and heavy lifting off the member's plate goes a long way in actually being able to convert and execute on these. So, when we think about features and functionality, the North Stars and guiding principles are all going to be about, how do we create a real user experience? How do we create true transparency? How do we bring that marketplace of competition to the hands of the member? And then how do we make sure we wrap our arms around them with that clinical pharmacist, with that personalization and all of the goodness that comes through, real advocacy and navigation within the pharmacy benefit that's never really existed.
Sorry. So as we think about that model and you think about the member experience, let me ask you something that usually we don't learn till after implementation, which is when you're giving these recommendations directly to individuals, you say doctor in the family or pharmacist in the family. And as somebody who's married to a doctor, I got a doctor as a parental figure, I got a couple doctors, they don't often agree. And it makes for an interesting, Thanksgiving meal. What do you guys see happening when you make these recommendations? You introduce consumerism, you're personalizing, doing all the things that I think we'd all agree are correct. Where does the conflict come from and how do you resolve that?
Yes. So the patient physician relationship is paramount. We put that on a pedestal and we are not trying to intervene within that equation, right? You go to a doctor, you get a prescription written. We believe that your doctor knows what's best, and that's going to be what's in the best interest clinically and from an outcomes basis. Now, here's what we forget. There's 10,000 drugs out there, and the average doctor knows about 200. So, they're going to write the prescription, whether a preferred brand is available, whether a generic is available, whether a biosimilar is available. They often don't even know nor understand those options, such that when we go to them and say, hey, are you okay with this version of the drug or this dose of the drug or this preferred brand or this biosimilar? In, I think it's 97 or 98% of cases, it's absolutely yes. Thank you for that partnership. If one's going to cost $10 for the member in the plan and the other is going to cost $10,000 for the member of the plan, this is exactly what we need to be doing. If there's any discrepancy, if there's any physician pushback, we want to side on the ledger of the physician to make sure that we're not disrupting that, critically important relationship. But, we also understand that most physicians don't know the universe of what's covered, don't understand in every case what one formulary may look like versus another, don't appreciate, some of the new drugs that have come to market or new drugs that have gone, to a preferred status or a generic status. As a PBM and as a fiduciary, we're really, looking at that every day and trying to supplement and complement that patient physician relationship, not intervene or disrupt. And I think that's an important part of our model. And that's what all the data shows is that, when we go have that conversation with the doctor, not only do they agree, but they're excited that someone's actually looking at the sustainability, the affordability, and the accessibility for the underlying member, where they may not otherwise have the know-how or the time to be able to do that.
Got it. That's great. And it's something it's funny within that family dynamic. One of the most common things that I hear is that the plurality of training, good, bad, or indifferent, happens in residency. And then folks, so that 10,000 drug down to 200 they actually know isn't really that surprising to me. But it is quite scary. But at the same point, that is where I think the clinical members of our ecosystem have to get comfortable with this, knowledge and nudging that's going to be happening from partners like you. So one of the things, it's a nice segue into a core belief of ClearPoint Health, which is we take a distinct amount of honor in the fact that we give peace of mind to people that we never meet. And we love that, right? And I think it becomes a really beautiful world. Everyone could wake up in the morning focused on helping people they'll never meet. I think our ecosystem, especially, could do a lot of good with that. When you look at your company and you think about all the things that you've done, I'd love to hear like your favorite story on how Rightway has made an impact on an individual's life. I'm sure you have lots of stories, but would love to hear your top one that tends to resonate with your team.
Yeah, no, and Jeb, this is where I think we're so aligned and with your mission at ClearPoint, which is to take better care of the member than anyone, to, go to the end of the earth to make sure that member experience in healthcare looks like something that we can all be proud of. And I think we have so much alignment on that effort. The one that I love that one of our clinical pharmacists shared within a mission moment a few weeks ago, I think encapsulates kind of that end of the earth mentality for our members, right? It's easy to call a pharmacy or call a doctor or find a cheaper alternative. That's more of the transactional table stakes stuff. We had a member who, was on vacation. They started their early summer break. They went to the beach and they had a continuous glucose monitor that was actually carved in under the pharmacy benefit. One of our partners was so frustrated with what that looked like on the medical side. They said, "Hey, Rightway, can you support this?" And we were able to. I think that was the first one of like, benefit design and configuration. We have flexibility, we have modularity. If that's what a plan sponsor wants, we can accommodate something like that. It's not going to be a financial consideration from our perspective. So they're at the beach, they're in the ocean, their continuous glucose monitor falls off, which, in some cases could be the end of the vacation. And, if you call your pharmacy and you get a refill too soon notification, and then you have to call a 1-800 number, you're going back, you're seeing the doctor, you need another prescription, and you're leaving the beach. What we were able to do is recognize that, hey, this isn't a refill too soon situation. This is an event that happened that was unanticipated and unplanned for, and that's where our clinical pharmacists went into work. They were able to make sure that the override from the prescription and the refill was not going to block this member's ability to do it. We recognize that not every pharmacy in a beach town is going to have the Dexcom monitor that this specific member needs and relies on. So they're calling different pharmacies in a remote beach town where there's only a few pharmacies every 3, 5, 10 miles. They were able to identify one. Not only were they able to identify it, but they were able to reserve it such that when the member went to the pharmacy, they were able to pick it up. Insurance obviously covered it. We made sure with the physician that there wasn't going to be an issue, for that next prescription. And the member was able to enjoy their beach vacation, which, sounds trivial and simple, but when we think about humanizing healthcare, when we think about the frustrations that, all of us go through every day, when you have to call the PBM, when you have to call, the health plan, like, you don't want that frustration. You don't want the call tree. You don't want, them telling you, "Hey, you call the pharmacies yourself. You deal with it." Like, that is where healthcare has gone so sideways and has created this avoidance ecosystem that no one wants to participate in. So, that was a really cool experience to, hear our kind of clinical pharmacists doing that extra lifting, doing that effort, recognizing that, we could have just told them, "Hey, you go deal with it. We'll override it. Let us know if you find a pharmacy and we'll deal with it." But, that's where the touch and the personalization really goes a long way. So, figured I would share that one.
It's great. I mean, I think too, it's I always talk about like the relativity of ratings, right? Because everyone's focused on their NPS score to compete with other 1-800 numbers. Where I applaud you guys is if this actually is a good experience, there is no 1-800 number.
100%.
And in fact, it's a human on the other side. And I'm all for anytime that you can do more sand and less spread, I'm here for it. I applaud you guys for that. And I love the mission moment and the nomenclature you use to kind of bring your team around that as well. It just goes to speak for the fact that this is a culture, right? This is a way of operating. It's not just a segmented value prop that you do as one off. It's how you guys live and breathe every day, which is it shows. So as we're winding up the show here and the final thoughts, I'm always interested to hear from people like you who you're a visionary in the space. You've seen the one hit wonders. You've talked with tons and tons of investors, right? You're seeped in this. So where's the glimmer of hope? right? Talk to me about what gets you most excited about the next 5 years. And then if you don't mind, I'd also love to hear your biggest threat. Now, I don't want the, modern healthcare, tabloid clickbait. I want the Jordan Feldman into the trenches, got the scars and stripes. Give me the good stuff. What is the thing that we should be hanging on, the glimmer, and what thing we should be most worried about?
Yeah, so let me start with the optimistic view and the, a better day in healthcare, tomorrow than today, but it's not going to be easy. Healthcare is, an entrenched, legacy, archaic. It's sclerotic. There's rot. There's all the things that, you would look in any other industry, and they've all been innovated. They've all, these incumbents have been outcompeted. They've, had to play the game on the field. And if you don't have the better product or the financial value prop, you're going to lose. Now, healthcare is the only industry where that hasn't been true. And even if you look at kind of the inclusion in the Dow 30 or the Fortune 100, the healthcare players seem to be the only players that are able to sustain cycle over cycle and generation over generations. There's a formidable entrenchment in status quo and legacy model. But here's what I would say is, we are starting to see technology democratize some great solutions. We are starting to see innovators, break through and cross that chasm of, scalability and, size to get that flywheel going in a way that becomes a competitive threat, to some of these legacy players. And then we've also seen, a bottoms up kind of frustration at the member level with what their experience looks like. So, I think we could be at an inflection point within the healthcare space, but it's not going to be easy. I mean, just a bit of a tangent. Like I would argue in my old life as an investor, the healthcare space is essentially uninvestable today. You have these vertically integrated payer PBMs that are facing legislation, litigation, all sorts of kind of competition as it relates to what's going on in their Medicare book or their physician practices book. You have the biotech and pharma industry that's under attack by this administration and the ability to innovate as it relates to breakthrough and novel medications like that's a bit of a scary value proposition. You have the provider ecosystem where you have folks essentially going bankrupt because their margins are too thin, their costs are going up. So I kind of give you that tangent to say, like, it's not all pretty out there in the healthcare ecosystem, but if we can create a market environment where competition prevails and member experience prevails and financial value prop prevails, I think we can see something materially better and different within healthcare going forward. So, I'm excited about that. I'm optimistic. We're seeing, at least within the little pocket that we play within Rightway, and I know you're doing this at ClearPoint, there's a established old guard that you were chipping away at. And, we're going to be able to make a pretty big impact on what this industry looks like going forward. Now, to the negative side, the players, they're not fighting fair. I'll give you a specific example. The PBMs are all owned by kind of complementary health plans, right? Whether it's a Cigna and an Express Scripts, a CVS and an Aetna, United and an Optum, an Anthem and an Ingenio or Carelon, whatever they're called now. And, there is a recognition that, that vertical integration was supposed to make an impact on outcomes, was supposed to make an impact on cost. I'll leave that for someone else to decide. But what's working to the disservice of our members and the ability to innovate is when these players use their vertical integration to say, we can't carve out to a new PBM. If you're going to be on XYZ health plan, you actually don't have the ability. We're not going to share a data file with them. Or we're going to charge a $20 per member per month carve out fee if you want to carve out to a new PBM. There is no rhyme or reason to that. This is kind of the clear definition of anti-competition, and they're going to do everything they can to retain their profit pools, to maintain a kind of grasp on the industry that's worked for them and them exclusively historically. And we're going to have to push back on that. It's going to take innovators like what you're doing at ClearPoint and, hopefully what we're doing on Rightway, but it's also going to take plan sponsors who look at that and say, no, enough is enough. If we are ever going to have a better tomorrow, we need to see this change. And, that's what we have it to be excited about is if the stakeholders kind of say, we need to do this different, we need to do this better. And then, the hope is going to be that whether it's, just technology innovation or technology plus what's going on with AI, that we're going to change the profit pools around, that we're going to change the member experience, that we're going to change, the cost structures of healthcare, and doing it in a meaningful and impactful way that, even if it is 20% of our GDP, all the metrics and outcomes that we really care about will start to improve. And I think that's what keeps me optimistic. That's what gets me out of bed every morning and, excited to keep fighting the fight to, provide better, more empowering healthcare for all our members in partnership with great partners like ClearPoint.
Thank you so much, Jordan. I feel like I could talk to you for another hour about all of this, and you're just a wealth of knowledge. And I want to congratulate you and your team at Rightway. To go out and win in this sector is difficult, but to do it with a moral compass, I think, is extraordinarily difficult. And you guys have done it. And I think that the snowball or flywheel, whatever you want to use, is certainly on your side. And I'm so excited about what you guys are doing. And thank you again for the partnership with ClearPoint. So for folks that are watching, what's a good way for them to learn more and reach out to you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. Email Jordan at rightwayhealthcare.com. We obviously have, a commercial and partnership team. Or through our website is a valuable place, or through the ClearPoint team, who we have a great partnership with. So yeah, don't be shy. We're looking forward to hearing from you and finding ways to collaborate and partner into the future.
Tell you right now, it's always funny. I've talked to some big Fortune 5, Fortune 10 executives, and it's always go to this generic email. And I'm like, you failed right there, right? Jeb at getclearpoint.com. If you are accessible, if you're member centric, you have to live it every day. Thank you so much for giving your email. Hopefully it doesn't get spammed from viewers, but I appreciate you being so accessible. And with that, this concludes today's call and session on Winning in Five with Jordan Feldman, co-founder and CEO of Rightway. And thank you again, Jordan, for making the time today.
Thanks, Fab. Really appreciate it.